Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. Today, I'm Graham coming to you from Edinburgh, and I will be your host for today's session. So before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping points to go through. This platform is preset to disable your mic and camera, so don't worry about trying to check on those. It's already been done for you. We do want to hear from you though. So we have an open chat box where you're able to send any questions you have for our fantastic panel. You are able to send the questions in for everyone to see, or alternatively, you can send the questions to just the host and the panelists by selecting this from the drop-down menu as well. We will answer as many of your questions as we can at the end of the panel event, we promise. For everyone's reference as well, we are currently streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So we are delighted you chose to join us today. This is our third session of 5 on our live events for Black History Month. If this is your first time joining us, then of course, welcome. And if you have attended previous weeks, welcome back as well. You are able to access our previous week's recordings on YouTube. If you log onto YouTube and just type in Enterprise Rent-A-Car Jobs, these will come up, all the recordings, along with some other great content as well. So do please feel free to have a look when you do have a chance. So today, our session focuses on communication. We are going to begin with a keynote from our Assistant Financial Controller, Bami, from our Southeast region, before moving on to another panel discussion with our business leaders from enterprise across the United Kingdom. We've had some great conversations on topics already, including authenticity, resilience, amongst many others, and we are sure that today is going to be no different. Absolutely not. Depending on which model you choose to use, communication, our key topic today, tends to fall into those broad areas of verbal, non-verbal, and written. We're going to explore all 3 of those areas today and kind of delve a little bit deeper, really to uncover more. As within these 3 areas, as many of us will be aware, it's quite a lot of complexity. It can be quite complex. You know, just talking about language, for example, in the UK alone, there's over 37 widely recognised dialects, from things such as Cockney to Geordie and Brummie, to name but a few. Recent numbers actually suggest that there's over 300 languages spoken in the United Kingdom, and in England, over 20% of school primary children use English as a second language. To put this in perspective, it's over 900,000 children. Now more than ever, we must recognise the diversity that many young people have, both in language and background as well. And on the note of communication, how we communicate does continue to adapt as well. Let's talk mobile phones very quickly. So statistics show that people check the phones at the moment on an average of almost 60 times a day. Those of us already in the workforce, half of those fall within working hours. And actually the way that we're using our devices is changing too. Over 90% of us use email on our phones, and the number of actual voice conversations we're having continues to decline as well. So there's just some food for thought to get started. So as a global employer, Enterprise prides itself on being open and inclusive to all backgrounds and ensure that we do communicate consistently with all of our employees. As my colleague Becky mentioned last week, we do not claim to be perfect or the experts in this field, but we recognise that there is more work to be done by us to ensure that progress can continue to be made. At Enterprise, we do take great pride in our internal programs we run to continue the development and support of employees. And by hosting external sessions like these, we can really showcase today our employees' experiences and share their fantastic insight as well. Throughout today, our panelists are going to be sharing stories of challenges they have faced and obstacles they have personally overcome as well, which we hope you'll find both useful and also will help support you in whatever stage of career you find yourself in, whether you are a professional already or whether you are looking to get that first internship or graduate job when you finish your studies. So just a quick reminder that we will be opening the chat box for correspondence and questions throughout. So please do feel free to post in the Q&A section. So that's enough for me to get started. And again, welcome everybody if you're just logging on. It now gives me absolute great pleasure to welcome our keynote for this morning, Bami Adeladun. Welcome, Bami. As they say, the mic is yours. Over to you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Graham. Thank you for having me on there.
No problem. Right, I'm going to leave you to it. I'll be back shortly.
Brilliant, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Bami Adeladun. I'm the Assistant Financial Controller in the Southeast region of Enterprise Rent-A-Car UK Limited, just like Graham said. I was born in Nigeria, and I spent the first 25 years of my life in Nigeria before relocating in 2005 to further my education. I had a first degree in banking and finance in Nigeria, then came over to the UK to study applied accounting. For me, relocating as a young adult probably means my experience of inequality, racism, and discrimination has not been at the same level as my peers who grew up in the UK. Just because of my limited exposure coming into study at an international college, and then from there going into work experience. So didn't really have the exposure to the environment that people who grew up in the UK would have had. Nevertheless, coming as a young adult had its own challenges. I was set in my ways, had my way of speaking, had my accent. I was born in the south side of Nigeria. My local dialect was Yoruba. And in Nigeria, we've got 3 main languages, but over 40 languages spoken in Nigeria. So the common language was English. So speaking English was second nature to me. But having said that, English was never my first language. Yoruba was my first language. So my accent was set already, and the way I spoke, and I still speak now, was that. And for me, dealing with my accent has probably been one of the most challenging parts of my career journey so far. After I completed my second degree in applied accounting in the UK in 2008, I started applying for roles. I had a first-class degree. I had a first-class honors degree in applied accounting, so the confidence was sky high. Coupled with a second-class upper degree in banking and finance, which was the first degree that I had in Nigeria. I was confident, I was applying for roles, and I was sure I was going to get something. However, it took me 3 years to get my first role. And I did apply for many roles, a whole lot of interviews, directly with companies, with employment agencies. It was intense. I had 3 years of intensity trying to look for a role in a discipline that I studied in, and I think I did really well in, because having a first class honors, I'm sure you'd agree, isn't easy. But throughout the process, it was always a no. They had better candidates from after the interview. I've even had times where I was told I was overqualified because I had 2 degrees on my name and, well, not enough work experience. So it was challenging, and honestly, I felt like my accent had a part to play at that time, whether directly or indirectly, because I was only a few years in the UK then, so perhaps my accent is probably shifted a bit now. But back then, I still had a Nigerian accent, which was really, really strong. And it was during the 3 years that the self-doubt and self-awareness started. When I'd gone for so many interviews, I knew I had the qualification and I got the pushback every time. Then it was a constant self-doubt, or it was constant self-doubt for when I go to interviews. Would the panel understand what I'm saying? Do they really want someone with my accent in the team. And in a way, that really affected my confidence. I was never able to truly be myself when I went in for interviews. It was always about thinking about how I was saying things as opposed to what I was going to say, which is the content of my answers to the interviews questions. So that was a tough period. But for me, the one thing that made a massive difference was mentoring, having a mentor. I had my first mentor 2.5 years into searching for a role. And that was a turning point for me, because I've just got to say, you cannot underestimate the importance of having a mentor as you walk through the career ladder. Especially someone who's good at the areas that you struggle in, because we all have areas where we require improvement. And you've got people out there that are great in those areas. And there's no better way to learn than to learn from those people on those areas that you're struggling with. They've done it, they've experienced it before you did, and you can learn from those experiences. Get encouragement, guidance, and some serious talk once in a while when you need someone to have a real conversation with you. And for me, the mentors I've had over the years have been really instrumental through my career in overcoming all the obstacles I felt in those 3 years when I was applying for roles and I wasn't lucky with that. And through the period, I think there are 3 key advices that I've received from my mentors over the years, 3 really big ones, which I still hold on to right now and I kind of practice in my day-to-day. First one is to always prepare for every meeting or interview like you have something on the line. It's easy to get people's buy-in when you know what you're talking about. And the way you know what you're talking about is by preparing before you go into any meeting, any interview, any presentation. Because you're going in there with all the tools you need to deliver. And for me, that really helped me with my confidence. And when you're confident, confidence improves your communication, because you go in there believing you can conquer the world and you do your thing. Secondly, was self-improvement. To identify areas that I needed to work on and get materials, get books, read up on those areas to improve myself. Some of the materials I've had or I've read in the past have been recommendations from my mentors. One of the ones that I still refer to every once in a while now is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's a great book, and if you haven't read it before, I would recommend for you to pick a copy and have a read, because it will make a difference, I promise. And the other one is the one I always go to when I'm applying for a role, when I'm interviewing for a role. And it's called 60 Seconds and You're Hired. It's surprising. I've had so many interviews in my life ever since I got that first role a good few years ago. Feels like a lifetime away now. But this book is one that I always go back to every time I have an interview, because it breaks down how you prepare for an interview, the way you go prepare, how you research for it. And it's made a massive difference over the years. Every time I've referenced that book going into an interview, I've gone into the interview with a whole lot of confidence. And thirdly, the third key advice from my mentors in the past is to have a commitment to be the best at what I do at all times, be the expert at what I do. And that's always been my goal. Every role I've been in, it's always been about giving my very best and being the best version of myself in that role. That gives you a story to tell. When you have a story, people are intrigued and they do listen to you. or story of previous successes, story of achievements you've had in the past. When you go into an interview, you go into a meeting, and you've got those in your house now, it's so easy to have conversations because you've got things to talk about. And finally, for me, I think practicing those 3 key points, which is always to prepare myself, self-improvement, reading up and trying to get better every time, and commitment to be the best at what I do, to be an expert in what I do. Practicing those 3 things have made a massive difference, or has made a massive difference, and has directly impacted on my communication. It enables me to walk into a room knowing that my accent is part of what makes me unique, and it's part of my selling point. And that's me, really.
Bami, wow. I mean, I've taken so many additional notes just after your point, and I've got some book recommendations that I need as well, because I'm a big self-development person as well. So just before we go into our panel, just because you covered so much, I hope you don't mind, I just have a couple of questions, just kind of follow-up questions. So, you know, you mentioned in your fantastic keynote, and it was so powerful, and it was so from the heart, that mentors have played a massive part in your journey. So can we just go back to your very first mentor, because you mentioned about that? How did you, because again, for many of our listeners on the call, they wouldn't have ever had a mentor, and actually sometimes trying to find one or getting one is one of the hardest bits. So can you share, you know, how did you come into contact with your first mentor?
Well, I think we underestimate the power of the people we know, i.e. the people in your network. And for me, the first mentor I ever had, I met through a group in church. So I attend church, and I met someone who was an accountant, who was doing great, had been in accounting for a while, and had gone really high in the organization he worked with. And I walked up to him and told him my experience with trying to search for a job, and straight up asked him if he could be my mentor. And I think it was a surprise to him, because I mean, he hadn't had anyone walk up to him and ask that question in the past, but he was really excited to have the opportunity to impact someone that way. So really, it's all about talking to the people around you. I mean, being interested in the people around you, learn what they do, know more about the people in your network, because when you know what they do, then you can know whether it's possible to actually tap off a few knowledge or a few things from them.
Fantastic. What great advice. And I know that you're a big fan of paying it forward, and mentoring is a big part of your role that you do now. Are you able to share with the listeners a little bit about how you kind of taken your experience of being mentored and you use that now to help support others?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think working for an organization like Enterprise Rent a Car is always been amazing how much we get involved in. I mean, bridge builders is one of the things we get involved with. For people who don't know that, it's an opportunity to help young kids who have come from a less privileged background and help hold their hands through a year of mentoring. And the other one that I'm actually involved with right now is with Person University, I think, where we're actually mentoring first-year students who are either from, I mean, a similar background as myself, or who are from a less privileged background, or whether it's disability, whether it's a whole lot of, I mean, reasons. But for me, I think what I've always done over the years is make sure I make myself available for these opportunities, because you get the emails at work and there's an opportunity to act as a mentor for people out there. And every time I remember my story and how my mentor or my mentors over the years have been able to impact my career, I'm always happy to jump on and play a part in that.
Amazing.
However, outside of that, I also do a few things personally outside of work. Like I said, in my church, I play a part in a few teams where I actually have the opportunity to encourage younger kids who intend to go to university, just to get someone who can direct them on the right path.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So much, there's so much mentoring is going on, and this is just I've learned even more that I didn't even realize. And then the last question I just have for you, Bami, before we go into the panel, you mentioned a couple of books, which I think is great. The 60 Seconds book is not one that I'm familiar with, so can you just share, because this sounds like a bit of a game changer for a lot of people. Can you share any wisdom from the book that may help people who've got interviews coming up?
Oh, it is really a game changer. I'm not going to lie to you, it made a massive difference for me. I think someone actually put in the chat box a few seconds ago who the author was. The author is actually Robin Ryan. So that's the name of the author. And there are a few things about it. I think the whole concept of the 60 Seconds You're Hired book is to make sure any answer you give in your interview is no longer than 60 seconds. Because it's been proven from research that the attention span of anyone in an interview panel is only 60 seconds. So you've got 60 seconds to pass your message to them. Otherwise, you've got the danger of not being able to pass the message through as you wish. So that's the key. Every answer in an interview, you've got to limit it to 60 seconds. And the biggest one for me that I love in this book is having a big sell. So at the end of the interview, when it's all done, or if they ask you a question, why you think you're the best person for the role, that's when you put out your big sell. And even if they don't ask you that question, you actually ask the panel, you haven't asked me why I think I'm the best person for the role. And when that question comes, then that's where your big 60-second sell comes in. And this is something you've got to put together and learn word for word. I mean, it's got to tell your story, your experiences, what you bring into the table. Talk about your passions, but you put everything in a 60-second sentence. And if you can crack that, and I've used that in the past multiple times, and I can promise you it works every time because no one expects it. Last interview I did, it was all finished, and I was like, well, you haven't asked me why you think I'm the best person for the role. And I said, okay, why do you think so? And I went on for 60 seconds without a break. And afterwards, you could see the face of the panel, as in they just smiled, and that was when I knew, yeah, I got to that.
I'm smiling just because I know you quite well, Bami, and I just would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that interview when that had happened. And I don't know if you realised or not, but actually what you just said there links into your other point about being prepared for every interview and practicing your big pitch and your sell is great. And I think, your messaging about getting your point across in a concise, clear manner in 2 minutes, 1 minute or less is so powerful, and I think that is something that we can all take. So Bami, thank you ever so much. We all really appreciate your words and your wisdom and so many golden nuggets that we can take going forward. And so we're just going to move into our panel discussion now, and Bami's going to be part of the panel as well, so he's going to share some more wisdom and insight. But actually my first question on the panel today is for Bola. So Bola, my first question is for you. So Bami talked a lot in his keynote about his accent, and accent bias is something that you hear quite often nowadays as well. So do you feel that this is still very prevalent in society nowadays? Is accent bias still a thing, or are we missing the point here, do you think?
Hi, thanks for the question. I was actually going to start with a research, a quote that I found in a research according to Phelps. So I'm just going to read it out, if you don't mind. According to a Forbes research in 2019, it actually takes you 30 seconds to actually place people in a certain aspect based on their accent. So it means that you can actually categorize someone within 30 seconds based on how they speak. And by doing this, you're thinking that they're not actually very smart, and you're unconsciously being biased. So Forbes actually found that people with good accents, so for example, like the British accent or like the American accent, they tend to be very, very prestige, and they tend to have a really good education compared to people with the Nigerian accent or like other African speaking accents. We tend to have less education and to be less prestige. So when I came to this country originally in 2012, I was really worried about my accent. So I'm from Nigeria anyway, similar to Bami. I was really worried about my accent. I was worried about how I was going to like communicate with people, how I was going to talk to them, how I was going to be able to like fit in, because I was just really worried about my accent. So when I came to this country in the classrooms doing lectures, I always just sat down and just listened to what people say, because I was worried that I would be laughed at when I talked. And to be fair, that actually did happen at some point. When I talked, people look at me like, oh, where are you from? Oh, are you Nigerian? Oh, yes, you sound this, you sound that. And it actually reduced my self-esteem to a certain point. It stopped me from doing presentations, which is what was required in school. It stopped me from public speaking and so many other things. So one thing that I would say, because I wanted to fit in so bad, and I wanted to like just pass my degree and be the best at what I do. Bami mentioned something about having a mentor, which is actually very important in the UK. Well, for me, in that case, that was my uncle. He said to me, I understand that you feel this way, and I understand that you need to fit among people. You can try to speak in the British accent, but you never get it. But you just have to be yourself. Well, I told him, no, you don't understand what I'm going through in school. They're laughing at me. I'm not myself. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to do that. It was like, okay, that's fine. What we can then do for you is we can get you a tutor to teach you how to speak in this way. And you can listen to like numerous British TV shows. You can listen to the news. You can like just listen to how people talk. And my uncle actually paid for someone to teach me how to speak English in the proper way, like to pronounce words, which was actually very funny. Like, because he understood what I was going through, even though he told me it was fine and people just have to accept me for who I am. In my mind and in my heart, that wasn't okay for me. I just wanted to fit in. So going back to your question, it is definitely something that is still going on around. And one thing I wish I learned and understood back then was not having to force myself to fit into a certain box, like just to be myself. Like if I have a certain confidence in myself that and speak effectively or like efficiently, people will understand what I have to say. I don't have to watch numerous YouTube videos. I don't have to watch, I don't have to get a paid tutor to teach me how to talk in a certain way. I don't have to constantly watch the news just to like learn how to speak in this certain way for me to fit in. So my advice to anyone on this panel today is, if you feel like you have an accent and you feel like that is, disrupting you from the way you talk or affecting your way of life, don't worry about that. It's absolutely fine. You need to have that self-confidence in yourself for people to believe in you, because if you don't believe in yourself, no matter the way you talk, if you talk in a certain way and you still don't have that confidence, people still won't believe in you. So self-confidence and believing in yourself is very, very important, regardless of the way you talk.
Absolutely amazing, Bola. And I completely agree in terms of what you're saying, that you have to be your authentic self, and you should absolutely celebrate the fact that you have that. And from your kind of perspective, when you came into enterprise and when you joined enterprise, was that something that was still in the back of your mind about your accent, or was that not something that came into play? I'm just interested to know.
So I would probably say the way I talk right now wasn't the way I was talking many years ago. Obviously, that was through the paid tutor, watching the YouTube videos, you know, training and everything. So I've had to like teach myself to talk in this way. But when I joined enterprise, I kind of had it at the back of my head to say, you know what, this might actually affect my credibility at work. This might affect the way I'm seen even, you know, the best person for this job. But then one thing I found out when I joined enterprise is that it actually has a very diverse workforce. Like everyone is actually like, it's not just one person. There are people who are like, you know, from different countries, people who speak not the way I speak, people who could be better. Like it's actually very, very inclusive. Like enterprise has a workplace that has a very inclusive team and inclusive practices. And obviously, what should I say? The way you speak can be seen as racism. So we actually tackled that in the enterprise. So it's something that's definitely not allowed. So I would definitely say that when I joined, I was quite worried about that. But as soon as I joined, I was like, you know what? Everyone is just like me. Like we've got many Black people, people from different races. So it wasn't something I had to worry about. I mean, I will say though, because I recently got promoted to my assistant manager role in July. And there were 20 people that actually applied for the job. And I was worried, oh my God, Bola, you're from Nigeria. You've only been with the company for about a year. There are 20 other people who are actually going to apply for this job. Your accent could be a problem. The way you talk could be a problem. Your identity could be a problem. The way you look, your color could be a problem. So I had that back at the back of my head. But thank God, I had mentors, just like what Bami said. Having mentors are actually very important. They told me, Bola, you need to understand how good you are. You're actually really good at this. Like they actually had to mention all my strengths, everything that I was good at. Your sales are amazing. Customers love you. You're really good at this. You're really good at that. Like I had people telling me what I was great at, which actually boosted my confidence for me to know, you know what? Yes, I can get this job. I can definitely get this job. And yeah, thank goodness I got the job at the end of the day. So I had that at the back of my head, but it wasn't something I had to worry about at all. Because as I said, you have confidence in yourself and you have the right people, the right mentors, like, you know, putting you in the right direction and always there to tell you that you're good for this, you're definitely going to get it.
It sounds like, did you read the same book that Bami mentioned? The 60-second book as well?
Funny enough, I haven't read about it, but I've heard about it, but I haven't read it yet. So, but that is definitely something that I'm actually going to read because that sounds really interesting.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Bola. So sticking with the theme of accents, one of our panelists joining us today, Aaron, is based in a slightly different part of the United Kingdom, based up in Manchester. So Aaron, would you be able to share any insight on this topic of accents and, you know, has there been any bias that you found previously as well?
Well, you know what, it's interesting you say it because I was listening to Bami's keynote and Bola there and the struggles that those guys had, especially coming from another country. You know, I thought when I started, I've got a Manc accent and I tailor it quite a lot in work because I deal with different types of clientele. I've worked in different parts of Manchester. I've worked in some of the more deprived areas, and now I'm in one of the more affluent areas. And I know definitely speaking to certain types of clients on clientele, you do have to tailor your accent and speak to them a different type of way. So it is something that is pretty conscious in my mind. It was fairly conscious, especially when I first started, because I'd be in a room with people who are all graduates, but they come from different parts of the Northwest. Some, again, more affluent areas, and from the South, and more of a deprived area. And people can put you in a box, especially there, like with the stats that Bola was coming out with, people automatically think that you're not as smart as somebody with a different accent. But what I took away from Bami's keynote is like accent bias, the confidence is just going to trump it, especially with that, the final sell. The confidence that you come and speak on is always going to trump it. So that's something I really took away from that, and that's something that I've kind of learned myself, that if you do have confidence in yourself, it kind of, the accent is lost. people can see the intelligence and can see the skills that you actually do have. So it is something that's I've come across before.
And on that note, Aaron, I mean, I'm privy to the fact that I've heard your story previously. Maybe not everyone on the call has done. So maybe not everyone is as confident as you, if you don't mind me saying. So do you have any advice on that note on confidence? Because, you know, you present yourself as a really confident communicator as well. So has that always been the case, I guess, would be my question. And do you have any tips?
I don't think it's always been the case. I've definitely been categorized as shy before, especially when I was younger. But as I've got older, it's like Bami said, you have to prepare for when you are coming into a meeting or an interview or a situation. You've got to prepare and study before. I find myself in a lot of situations now. I've had a lot of experience. I've experienced a lot of different scenarios where I've had to communicate well. Scenarios that are more serious and some not so serious. In and out of work. So I've definitely had to learn and really self-reflect. It's took a lot of that, really. And just, to be fair, I listen to a lot of podcasts talking about speech and communication and how to mediate, essentially, and deal with different situations. So I think it is important to project confidence, even if you're not, because you say you got to fake it till you make it. I know, again, when I was younger, I wasn't always the most confident person, and in a group I wouldn't be one of the louder ones. But as I've got older, you know, I'm pretty much there now. I don't mind holding conversations. I don't mind having debates. I don't mind doing things like this where I've got to speak to, you know, quite a lot of people and share personal things. I think it does take a lot of practice, but you do have to prepare, and you've got to do a lot of self-reflection, and you've got to really, it's got to be true to you when you do speak about things. And Bami talked about being an expert. If you're an expert, you know, and when you know, it comes natural and you can speak naturally. I think that's important.
Amazing. And it's great to hear so many links back to Bami's keynote, and you've kind of covered again that bit of self-development again. That whole part of preparation really comes into it. And, you know, I completely understand from someone who has to present a lot. You have to practice, right? You have to practice. Otherwise, if you don't practice and know what you're going to say, and you know, this is just continues this theme. So we're going to just move on to the next topic now, just because I'm mindful of time. So we're moving on to something slightly different about communication now. We're going to touch on non-verbal communication and some things to do with body language. So I'm going to direct the next question to my colleague based up in Scotland, in Edinburgh, in the same city as me, just in different offices today, Lyndon. So would you say, Lyndon, that from your experience, have people ever treated you differently based on your body language or how you've kind of projected yourself, I guess?
Yeah, no, 100%. I would definitely say body language is a massive thing. The way you project yourself and the way you hold yourself is always very important. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, when I first started at Enterprise, I'd literally been in the company like 2 or 3 weeks. And just based on how I was holding myself, how confident I was in my ability, even though I didn't know necessarily everything that I needed to know, I just projected that kind of like excellence and that kind of confidence and that sort of expertise, where people would come up to me asking me if I was the manager of the branch. And that was me 2 weeks into the business. And I was like, not at all. Actually, I've only started like 2 weeks ago. I don't really know what I'm doing. I just act as though I know what I'm doing. And within that, I kind of found like a lot of success. So within Enterprise, there's a way we measure, obviously, success from the day-to-day kind of style in the branch. So we have something called like the Elite Club. I was able to attend like 2 Elite Clubs my first 2 months. That was like pre-COVID before it got cancelled. I would have been like 3 for 3, just saying, before then. But the main thing that I kind of did and the way I projected myself, which led to me having that success within when I first started, was just holding myself in high regard, having that self-confidence, always be open, kind of like shoulders, kind of relaxed, but then also broad at the same time. So what I would say is body language is something that's very important, because I think I read an article the other day where it said that between about 70 to 93% of all communication is nonverbal. So as much as what you're saying is what you're saying, certain people will take it different ways just based on your body language. I'll give you another example as well. Sometimes we'll have difficult conversations we need to have with customers where there's like certain damages on cars and stuff like that. You need to charge them like X amount of money, which obviously is not always the best conversation to have, because it's quite a difficult one, because sometimes they could obviously dispute it, but that's going into the semantics. So the way I always do it is have an open body that I'm both listening to what they're saying, but they'll also have the opportunity to listen to what I'm saying, but having that confidence projected to where they feel like you're the expert in what you're saying, that you know what you're doing. And that would diffuse a lot of different situations or escalate loads of different situations as well.
Amazing, Lyndon. And again, that theme of confidence, again, being the expert at what you do and, you know, listening, I think is so critical, isn't it? We're always told, aren't we? We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and use them in that order. And I think that really comes through. On the note of body language, Bami, is there anything you want to add from kind of non-verbal communication from a body language standpoint?
Well, thank you, Graham. I think for me, when it comes to body language, Lyndon has actually said it right over there. You've got to stand tall. I think appearance also matters a lot because the way you look, your appearance, people judge you by your appearance. So making an effort to look professional at all times, to make sure your appearance actually conforms with the expectation or the norm in your organization, wherever you go. But talking about body language, one thing I've kind of seen in the past, I know you tend to get a message once in a while about people tend to feel like Black people are a bit aggressive when they have a conversation. The way they talk, when you're having a conversation with someone, just being yourself. But you get that message at times where people feel like you're being aggressive. And that in a way always pushes you back a bit because you don't want to be yourself because of what people might feel about you. And if you can link that up with my experience, I'm 6'8", so I'm quite tall. So on a regular day, regular conversation, I walk into a room trying to talk to someone, I'm always constantly trying to make sure I'm the gentleman in the room. With my appearance, with the way I talk, with the way I behave myself, because when you combine someone who's 6'8" and the feeling that they're aggressive, it's never a good combination.
And just being mindful of that, I think, and it comes down to that self-awareness piece as well, and links back again, Bami, to your point about the self-development, Aaron's point about communicating, and Lyndon's point on listening as well. So I think it really links it all together really, really nicely. We've had a question from Tim in the audience. I'm going to direct this one to Bola. So Bola, the question from Tim is, how important is it to communicate effectively and concisely during an interview to overcome any verbal assumptions an interviewer would make because of an accent? So I'm just going to repeat that one because it's quite a long question. How important is it to communicate effectively and concisely during an interview to overcome any verbal assumptions an interviewer would make because of an accent?
I think you can actually link that to my quote when I said about, before I started my question, my answer this morning, about how verbs actually found out that it takes us 30 seconds to actually categorize someone into a certain ethnic group and they're based on the way they speak. So, so going back to that question, communication is very, very important, like in every part of our life, in an interview, at work, at school, everywhere you go. And it is very important for you to make sure that you communicate effectively everywhere you go, because you not communicating effectively could actually be detrimental to you not getting that job. So going back to my interview for the assistant manager job that I had back in July, in my head, I had lack of confidence. I had low self-esteem that I wasn't going to get this job because there were 20 other people that was also interviewing for that job. So that could have affected the way I would come across to the interviewer. That could have affected the way I would communicate. I could have been blabbering, looking around, like. But obviously, as I said, with my mentors and everyone telling me, you know what, you don't have to worry about your accent, you don't have to worry about the way you talk, you don't have to worry about the way you look, you just have to go there and show them you're the best person for this job. And by having that confidence, that, you know, boosted my communication, that boosted the way I would come across to my interviewer, like saying, you know what, I'm the best person for this job, regardless of how I sound, or the way my accent may sound, I am the one that you want for this job. So I think what Bami actually said about that book, you know, the 30 seconds one there, that is actually a really good one. I wish I read that before I went for my interview, but regardless, still for future interviews, I'll definitely be doing that.
No need, Bola. You sold yourself against 20 other people. You sold yourself and really demonstrated your strength. So on this topic about interviews, we've all of us have been in interviews here. So what I'm just going to do now is just ask the panelists on that theme of communication and tips on communication. So I'm going to come to Lyndon first. Lyndon, have you got any top tips on how to communicate effectively? Because it's something that we can all work on.
Obviously, just after you finish university, you start going through a load of different interviews and stuff. So I actually got a little bit of advice from my brother just before I went for one, just to how to approach an interview. And the advice he gave me, like I haven't actually told him to this day, I feel like it was the wrong advice. So he told me that you need to be closed off, be quiet, well, not quiet, be like still, have your hands underneath the table, kind of like a closed off position. And to be honest, I felt like I was saying in the interview, I felt like I did enough to get the job, but afterwards I didn't really get feedback from the company, which was something of its own. But then I kind of thought that wasn't really showcasing me, because what I always say and what I always do just before an interview is I think that the reason that they've got you here is because they think you're good enough. It's just your job not to mess it up. So I started looking at different techniques in how I can communicate effectively, not even just obviously having done the work, having done the preparation, so you know what you're talking about, is how you're going to then project yourself. So what I used to do before, and I still do now before every single interview, I'll do something called power poses. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, where like I'll go into like the toilet or something, or just before I go into the building, I will just stretch out, make myself as big as I can, make myself as comfortable as I can. That way I'm projecting like my best self forward. And within that, I found great success. That's how I managed to obviously land this role, and then every single other promotion I've had since then. So what I'd say is always be prepared, know what you're talking about, do your research. Just in terms of your own personal preparation just before the interview, do a couple of power poses, just like literally stretch your arms out, make yourself as big as possible, because it will relax you and then gives you that confidence to be able to go into that room, put your best foot forward, and always showcase your own personality. Because at the end of the day, they're not hiring a certain person, they're hiring you. And the only person who can truly represent you is you.
I love that, Lyndon, on power poses. And it's something that I've seen a lot. And there's often people that get you to do kind of the superhero pose, don't they? Where they get you to kind of put your hands on your hips and picture yourself as a superhero. And I think it's powerful stuff. How about you, Aaron? Are you a power poser? Is there something else that you do for your top tip on communication?
The main thing for me is to just be as relaxed as possible. So it depends what type of conversations I'm having, but in an interview, I can get a bit not hyper, but a bit amped up for it. So I try and just get as relaxed as possible, listen to relaxing music, make sure I know what I get across, and make sure I try and display myself. But in other settings where I have to motivate people, it's all about music, to be honest. For me, is I try and listen to something that will really amp me up and get me really hyper if I need to get other people on it. So that's for communication wise, I use music as a tool. But the main thing in interviews, I always have to be relaxed, because I can kind of definitely get carried away.
All that energy, Aaron. We're here for the energy. You probably, those tuning into the call, you can probably see we're quite big energy people. Now, Bami, I'm just going to finish up with you and your top tip. I mean, so many nuggets already. There might be another book that you're going to recommend. Have you got any other communication tips or interview tips to share with everyone today?
I do not have any other book, but just to kind of answer Tim's question, how important is it to communicate effectively and concisely during an interview? I think the answer is very, very important. And I'll give you an example of an experience I had a few years ago. Went into an interview, and the first question I was asked was, tell me about yourself. And I went on for about 2 minutes because, I mean, I love talking about myself. And the minute I finished that, one of the panelists looked at the time and said, sorry, we don't have all day today, you know. And imagine getting that reaction in your first question, or that reaction to your first answer in an interview. I did get the job, but I was actually surprised I managed to turn things around. And that was the reminder for me about the importance of that 60 seconds and you're hired. And that's what that book tells you. I think the other thing I've got to say is practice, practice, practice. Get your friends in, sit in front of your friends and get them to ask you generic interview questions. Practice those questions, practice your answers, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes when you get into the real settings. And the final thing for me, you get a whole lot of questions in interviews now, which are competency-based, and it's all trying to tap into experiences you've had in the past. And what I say is everyone should have about 10 examples of great things you've done in the past. Know those examples from start to finish. Remember them. Because when you get into the interview and someone asks you a competency-based interview, a competency-based question, you've got a pool of examples you can actually pick one from to answer that question. That's always worked for me, because I go in there and I've got examples of things I've done in the past. And when someone asks me a question, I can link it up to one of my examples and I use that as an answer.
Many people can relate on going into an interview and you sometimes have a bit of a mind blank, right? Don't you? Or you think, so having those strong examples to fall back on is really useful and really helpful. So I'm just going to go to a question that we've had from one of our attendees. So thanks for this one. I'll give it some context. More and more now, we are having to do online events like this one, where we're having to communicate in a virtual setting. And the question is a great one. It's a specific question. So I'm going to go to Aaron first on this one, which is, Aaron, how can body language be taken advantage of effectively for online communication? So if you're in an online setting like this one, what sort of things should we be looking out for on body language to put yourself in the best possible light?
So in an online setting like this, I would say it's important to, again, appearance still does matter. You know, even if your top looks smart, you know, you can have your bottoms wherever because you can't see, but appearance is definitely important. But in terms of body language, you've got to make sure you're still upright, make sure you're still concise, make sure you try and communicate as clear as possible, and make sure you're always looking interested, because a lot of the times you forget that the camera's on or the mic's, you know, you might not be unmuted. You've got to make sure them type of things are watertight. Always look interested, always listen, take notes as when you can, because this is not going to go away the way we're doing meetings virtually. So it's always important when someone comes to you, you can really be alert and be ready to answer any questions. Because if you're not listening and it's clear, then it's going to go against you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of leads into so many things, because we've all been there on conference calls where people look a little bit disinterested, and you can see, or sometimes people look at their own reflection and think, goodness, is that what I look like when I'm not speaking? How about you, Bola? Do you have any top tips for communicating or body language in an online setting?
Karen said everything I was going to say, but it's just literally what you said. Like, you need to act like you're interested in there. You might think they're not watching, but they're actually watching. And the fact that it's actually online, that means it could literally be streamed. So it could be on live. They could go back to it and like watch the way you're acting. So you say acting uninterested or like looking like you're distracted could actually hinder you getting that job. So literally what you said, just make sure you're acting engaged, make sure you write notes, make sure you dress properly, make sure you're in a very quiet place, because obviously you don't want any distractions. You need to take it as important as it would be in a normal face-to-face interview, and just be yourself, and yeah, be confident as well, and smile, because that's very important as well. Yeah, so
we always say smiling goes a very, very long way. How about you, Lyndon? Is there anything you would add to Bola or Aaron's points for body language in an online setting? Because I know you're part of some committees at Enterprise where you have to kind of do quite a lot of Teams calls as well.
Yeah, to be honest, what they both said is pretty much bang on. One thing I probably would say is obviously be expressive, but not too expressive, because ideally you don't want to like have your hands waving all over. Try and obviously have as still a frame as possible, but be engaging, lean forward, lean back, just so it looks like you're talking to them. Because the thing that I find the hardest is being able to gauge what the other person's seeing on the other side, like via a Teams call or like a Zoom call, just because usually you can kind of assess based on body language. So just look at the responses. If they're nodding their head, you're doing a good job. If they're just still, maybe do a little bit better.
I love that. And it is, the thing is that you don't want to have hands all over the place, but you're always taught to communicate using your hands, but it looks a bit strange when you're on camera. You don't want to be waving too expressively. Okay, well, thank you ever so much to our wonderful panel for all those answers. I'm going to come to Bami just to wrap up with this kind of question. And this is how we're ending every session that we're going through over the 5 weeks. So Bami, as you know, diversity, equity and inclusion is incredibly important to enterprise as a whole. But in your opinion, why is diversity so important, Bami? And why should we as a business encourage future Black leaders? So that question's to Bami.
Well, why is diversity so important? Because our differences is what makes us special. I mean, there is strength in differences. When you've got a combination of people within a team from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, what you've got is a mix of knowledge and skills and experience that can only take the organization in one direction, which is up. And for me, I think that's the biggest thing we've got to look at. And secondly, why should organizations focus on diversity? Every organization, I'm proud to be working for an organization like Enterprise Rent-A-Car, because this is one of the big things about us. Because what we do as a company is we want to reflect the community we serve. And look at London, look at the UK. You've got a mix of people from different parts of the world. And how can an organization justify anything other than having their workforce actually reflect that community that they serve? And I think that's the biggest reason we've got to do that. And it's the right thing to do as well.
So powerful. And I would just like to thank everyone who's tuned in today and all our wonderful panelists. As always, the insight is phenomenal. I've just taken so many notes. I'm sure many of us have on the call as well. I even noticed some of our panelists taking notes as well as they're going, which shows how important the learning and development is for them as well. So just to wrap up, everyone, we still have 2 weeks left of our sessions. So tune in next week, same day and time, to discuss the responsibility businesses have to drive this positive change in the communities, as Bami mentioned about serving our communities, and actually specifically how enterprise are really stepping up to the challenge of community. We'll be meeting one of our community business partners, Equality Action, who are a fantastic charity supporting the local people in the areas of welfare, immigration, health and housing. Our sessions will then culminate on the final Friday of the month with the topic of mentoring, which is absolutely not to be missed. So look at that, literally bang on time for today. Again, huge thank you for everyone who's joined, and always legendary contributions from our panelists. Thank you ever so much. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you ever so much, and take care all. Bye now.